Cool. We are recording. Welcome to the Warriors Raised podcast, Josh. It's an honor to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Cool. To start with, I'd love to hear if you want to share just a little bit about, we'll start with what I know you were in the military at one point in your life, and we can jump around all over the place from here, but I'd love to start with what made you decide to sign up or join? What was the initiation for that or initiative?
So I always wanted to be in the military. Ever since I was a little boy, I always wore, fatigues and played Army and did all of the standard American boy stuff growing up in the early 90s. And I just always wanted to be G.I. Joe. So I wasn't a very good student. I was too active, we'll say, in school, and at a young age was put on Ritalin and battled with all of that. And so from 8 to about 13, I was always battling with teachers and my parents because I didn't want to take the ADHD medicine, and I didn't really want to be in school. I wanted to be outside doing things. And so by the time I had gotten to the 9th grade, I was in what's called a behavior class, where basically they just take all of the quote unquote troublemakers and they put them in one room, and there's one teacher and 4 teachers assistants in there, and they just say deal with them. And by the time I had gotten to the end of the 9th grade, my mother kind of pulled me aside and said, you're not on track to graduate. You're not passing even in this class. You're just getting in trouble. In fact, I had been suspended so many times from school that my mother refused to come and get me. And they would literally give me a city bus pass to get on the city bus and take the city bus the 3 miles home, because my mom just was like, I'm not leaving work. I can't continue to leave work. So she had pulled me aside and recommended to me that I go and get my GED and get a job and start working. So I did that. I dropped out at the end of the 9th grade, went and got my GED when I was 15 years old, and basically kind of started taking care of myself from that point financially. My parents put a roof over my head, but I paid for my own clothing, my own vehicle, my cell phone. Back in the day, it was a big giant brick, And when I turned 17, I went straight to the Air Force recruiter's office. And the Air Force recruiter was like, why aren't you in school? And I told them, I said, well, I've been out of school since I was 15. I have a GED. And he's like, well, you should go back to school, but if you're really not going to go back, the Army office is right next door. Why don't you go talk to them? So I went into the Army recruiter's office, and he's asked the same question. He's like, hey, how come you're not in school? Because I looked very much like, a 16, 17-year-old boy at the time. So I told him, I said, oh, I'm done with school. I have my GED. I'm not going back. And he says, go back to school and come back when you have your diploma. Well, that wasn't a good enough answer for me. So I drove to the next town over and went to a recruiter's office. And he's like, how come you're not in school? Same deal. And I said, I have my GED. I'm not going back. I've already been to 2 recruiters. He's like, okay, well, you want to join the Army? Your parents are going to have to sign the contract. I said, that's not going to be a problem. I've been a pain in my mom's rear end for long enough. I'm sure she'll gladly sign the contract. This is in 2004. And so I went to MEPS and took the ASVAB tests and did all of the military entrance processing. And my mother signed the contract. My dad signed the contract. And I joined the Army in 2004 at the age of 17. So it was kind of a dream come true for me, because a lot of the things in my life hadn't really panned out at that point growing up. It was, between school and being kind of an outsider, it was really a big accomplishment for me to actually get into the military. So it had always been a dream of mine.
I love that. That's amazing. And when you got into that, well, first, I just want to say something quickly about something that I've recently become aware of is that, well, I was talking to someone who works in the field of psychiatry, and they actually have like a special psychiatric term, which I'm not going to remember right now, but it's basically a term for boys like around the age 12, 13, who are like not sitting down and not obeying their parents. And like they have this like special diagnosis that is, I'm sure this is no surprise to you, but it blew my mind hearing the description of like what qualifies somebody to be diagnosed with that. I was like, that to me sounds like a healthy teenage boy who needs to be pushing his physical limits to the maximum and like seeing what he's made of. Like I just, it really blew my mind actually that there was this term that was making it sound like it was a problem when in my mind that was like optimal health. But I know it's its own like pandemic of Ritalin, ADHD medication, and just yeah, probably only about 10% of people are actually made to thrive in a school environment, if that, you know. But anyways, back to my question. I'm curious, when you got to the military, did it provide the environment that you were looking for? Like, what was that experience? Like, it was this dream that you've been dreaming of for a long time, and then it happened. What was that like?
Yeah, so initially, yes, it was. I expected to. I joined the infantry, so and the infantry is, you know, like the frontline fighters. I mean, it's in the infantry, we would say there's two armies. There's the infantry, and then there's everyone that supports the infantry, because you are the tip of the spear. And so I expected to go through infantry training, and it to be very difficult and hard, and to be very structured, and all of those things. And it was exactly what I needed, having strong men showing me, you know, exactly how to be a man, how to self-start, how to self-motivate, and do all of those things, and show myself that I could physically do things, push my body to the limit, push my mind to the limit, and succeed. So it very much was. And then after basic training, my very first unit was the Second Armored Cavalry Regiment, which is was very interesting because the infantry and the cavalry, basically, they're both combat arms, and there's a rivalry there. And I'll take a little jab at the Cav right now. There's no infantryman that says we're basically the Cav, but there's always Cav scouts that say we're basically the infantry. So when I got put into this unit as a brand new E2 private infantryman in a Cav guy's world, there was a lot of like hazing going on, but it's not like a bad hazing. Like, these things are very much, I think, necessary for building rapport with your leadership and your peers, because once they haze you and you get through it and you're like, all right, you know, you can't smoke a rock, you earn that kind of peer-to-peer respect. And they were very strict. It was very old school Army. You know, shine your boots, and they better be shining in the morning, and you better, you know, come up here. And when I first walked into my unit, I was escorted to the platoon office, and my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Baxter, they had all just started trickling back in from Iraq. They deployed to Iraq in 2003, convoyed from Kuwait into Baghdad, and got in some very serious firefights in their deployment. They were there extended out to 18 months. And Sergeant Baxter was a pretty awesome guy, but he intimidated the hell out of me at first. And I was already nervous because this is, you know, brand new to me, people I've never met. And I go in the office and he asked me, Private Buis, what are the 3 types of heat casualty and how do you treat them? And I just kind of froze. And I was like, and he goes, what, they didn't teach you that in the infantry school? You're going to get taught by a Cav scout, get down in the push-up position. And he started making me do push-ups, and he threw a first aid manual down. And he said, you know, by lunchtime, I want to know what the 3 types of heat casualty are and how you treat them. And if you don't know, I'm going to scuff you up. And if you don't know what that means, I'm going to take you to the volleyball pit, which is sand, and you're going to low crawl all day, basically. So I had to go and kick myself into gear and like rebrush up on those things. And then once I showed that I could do that that day, he gave me a weapons manual, a Soviet weapons manual, and he says, tomorrow I want to know what the specifications on an AK-47 are, the point distance, the max effective range, all of these things, and you better know it, or else we're going to go to the volleyball course. So every day I would get a new weapon that I had to study, a new topic that I had to study, and he would inspect my boots, and ended up building this really good rapport between he and I, because he was showing me that you have to be accountable, and if you're not accountable, there's going to be consequences, real consequences, something that I didn't really have growing up. There was consequences growing up, but not at this level. There wasn't it was just very different growing up. With my father was in the picture and everything, but he was definitely not like this type of a man. And so having this strong male figure in my life, he was like one of the first guys that I gravitated to. And it was very much what I needed. And it was very much exactly what I was looking for. And so that was the first 8 months of my military career. And then what we found out that why all of these infantry guys showed up in a cav unit was because they were going to disband that cavalry unit and send them to another base. And they actually went up to Fort Lewis, Washington, and all of these brand new infantry guys who had all went to basic training together and graduated together and came here together are going to stay and stand up the 4th Brigade, 10th Mountain Division. And so that's what we did. I stood up the 4th Brigade, 10th Mountain Division, 2nd Battalion, 30th Infantry Regiment. And something happened at that point. All of the senior leadership that we had was now gone, and it was all basically the blind leading the blind for about a year, I'll say, where we didn't have any non-commissioned officers. We literally had, the military ranking system is E1 through E9, E1 being basically no rank. I mean, you're an E1 rank, but then E2 and then E3. We basically had E3s acting as team leaders, which is an E5 position. We had E4s and E3s acting as squad leaders, which is an E6 position. And so there was a lot of misguidance going on at that time. And then we did get a bunch of NCOs in, and we made our bonds and everything there. But it was a very different climate from what we had originally started with. So it kind of changed my opinion a little bit of everything that was going on in the military.
What was the main, what was the main difference that you noticed, like in terms of obviously having less experienced leadership, or like having people who maybe had never even been out?
There was a couple of things. So when I first got to the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, they take you through the regiment, and they bring you in, they show you all the regimental history. There's a lot of unit pride there because there's all of this history that comes along with it. They put you in front of this giant battle board, and they're showing you the first Gulf War. They like have the whole battlefield from the first Gulf War laid out for you. And there's people there that really took pride in being in the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And when we switched over to the 4th Brigade, 10th Mountain Division, this unit had been disbanded since Vietnam. So it's a unit that would be reactivated, deactivated since basically the Civil War. And the 10th Mountain Division is actually located in Fort Drum, New York. Well, we were at Fort Polk, Louisiana. So we were kind of the redheaded stepchild, or the bastard child of the South for the 10th Mountain Division. And we didn't really have anyone that had been in this unit. We were the beginning of this unit since Vietnam, so there wasn't any real history and pride to go along with that. And then the other part of it is that the leadership, the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment had been there for a decade, and there was guys there who had been there for that long, or decade or more, who had been there for that long and were very old school Army. And what I mean by old school Army is like they're going to scuff you up, they're going to haze you, or smoke you, or whatever you want to call it when you kind of screw up. And would go in your room and do a room inspection, and if it wasn't perfect, they're going to toss your room. and then you're going to be, it sucks when you're going through it, but it instills a certain level of discipline. There wasn't a whole lot of that going on within after that transition into the 4th Brigade, 10th Mountain Division. And I don't want to badmouth that unit, because it really, I mean, I have a lot of love for it, and a lot of love for the men that I served with in it. It was just one of those differences that we did have some good NCOs that came in. I had a lot of good NCOs that were old school Army, but the Army was also changing at the time. Retention was low. People weren't re-enlisting. People weren't signing up. And so they changed standards for who could join the military. And so you would get people that would come through and be chaptered out of the military within 4 months of arriving because they were just too wild. And that also started to kind of change my opinion of everything that was going on within the military. We had a wave of new guys come in in 2005 during the surge. And, a bunch of guys would go and get a DUI within a week of being there and crash their car, or, and then you would come to find out that these guys had already had like felonies and criminal records, but they got into the military under a waiver because they lowered the standard. And it just kind of, to me, in my own opinion, kind of cheapened things for me. And I wasn't old enough to be able to, and mature enough to be able to like recognize that was going on, but also stay focused on my own path and my own desires to be in the military. So there was just a lack of senior leadership there. And then it was a very transitionary period where, a unit needs a few years to really get on its feet for everything to function correctly. And if you don't have that, or you're coming into that, where I came into the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment and everything was, this is how it works. And then changes are being made, and maybe you don't like those changes and stuff because you're like, is this really how it's supposed to be? Is this really how the Army operates? Is this really, it allowed for, it allowed me to, I wasn't mature enough to deal with all of that at the time. So it was a very difficult time for me in the military as well. So,
was there a specific moment for you when you realized or like noticed that that came online? Like you said that you didn't have, I can't remember your exact words, but that you didn't have the like discernment to just focus on what was important for you. Did you have a moment in that time where that shifted, or where I guess your own inner self-leadership kicked in to a higher degree? You were like 20, 21 around this time? I'm trying to follow the age.
No, I was 19. So I was 17 when I went in, and I was probably but when things were really coming to a head for me, I was probably about 19, around 19 and a half years old. And there was a moment where I did kind of try to kick things into gear for myself. And I actually moved over to another company within my battalion, and that I thought would be, and it ended up being a good move for me. And so when I went over there, I just did not have the same ship and bond with the guys in that company that I had when I was in Bravo Company. And so I just really wanted to get back to Bravo Company. And so it took about another 6 months or so to get me back over to Bravo Company. And then things were going fairly well for me. I was back into doing what I wanted to do. Back in the line unit. Delta Company was a weapons company, so you rode around in Humvees, and there was just a certain bravado about being in the line where you have to walk everywhere. You put a rucksack on and you walk into battle. Or we were an air assault unit, so we would get on Blackhawks, and then they would fly us to where we're going to go and set us down, and then you would do your stuff and walk back. Just that was like the macho thing, and so I wanted to be back there. And I was dealing with some personal things that had happened in my life. I had gotten into a relationship with this woman, and we were just way too young. And she knew how to work the system and got me in a little bit of trouble. And then it was all very arbitrary. Like I wasn't really in trouble, but I was in trouble. And my leadership knew like it was all BS, but I still had to go through the big army machine because it's like, oh, this has happened or supposedly happened. So now you have to go through this, and this step. And along the whole way, it's like, hey, we know this is nonsense. Like, this is kind of BS that you have to do this, but just go do it and whatever. And I just could not get over that. And so, and then after that happened, I was like, all right, well, that's behind me now. We're just gonna keep going forward with all of this. And then I was drinking a lot because of the stress, and I was too young to be drinking. I was only 19. I shouldn't have been drinking, but in the military, that's just what you do. When I first got to the barracks at the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, my initiation into the barracks was there was a garden hose hanging from the 3rd story of the building with a funnel on it, and you had to funnel 6 beers out of this garden hose. And these guys were all coming back from Iraq, so it was just a wild party all the time. And my barracks was known for the parties that we would throw in our stack. And so there was just a lot of drinking going on. I ended up re-enlisting for 5 more years. My time was coming up, and so I re-enlisted for 5 more years because I didn't see myself doing anything else. But within about 6 or 7 months after my re-enlisting, my drinking was just too out of control, and I was doing that just to really escape everything else because I felt a little betrayed by some of my leadership, and a little betrayed by Big Army for making me do these stupid classes that I had to go to for no reason, even though they knew it was for no reason, and I was exonerated of everything. I just wasn't mature enough to, one, be drinking, and two, deal with these big life situations that I had found myself in. And so the kind of tipping point was we were doing our expert infantry, getting our expert infantry badge. And this is a really big deal. You have to go through and qualify expert on every weapon system, every process, all of it, and that everything that the infantry does. And you get this award called the expert infantry badge. And I had made it basically all the way through, and gotten drunk and got in a fight, and I broke my hand. And I didn't know this, but if you go on profile, which is what happens when you get an injury in the military, it disqualifies you from completing your EIB. And so,
Oh, you got muted there. Yeah. I know you're still muted. Hold on, Josh, we can't hear you. Josh, hold on, you're still muted. Wait. You're on mute.
oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. So
I can't hear you though.
You can't hear me? How about now?
Okay, there we go. Yep, sorry.
Yeah. It cut out right when you were saying that you like that you didn't know that if you got an injury, or what happens if you get an injury, and then from there.
Yeah, so I didn't know that if you get an injury and you go on profile, that it disqualifies you from completing the expert infantry course. And so when I showed up that following Monday to continue on with it, I had a cat on my hand, and my squad leader was like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, what'd you do? And I was like, well, I've got in a fight and I broke my hand and had to go get it fixed up. But, we basically, all we had left was the road march to do. And so I was like, it's no big deal. I can road march. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Like, you disqualified yourself. This is a big deal. He's like, I'm going to write you an Article 15, which is getting in trouble. I mean, it's like getting a misdemeanor, let's say, in the military. And he wrote me a misdemeanor, basically an Article 15 for destruction of government property for breaking my hand. And from that point on, me and him just had it out for each other. And I would do things at every chance that I could despite him, and he would do things every chance he could despite me. And I ended up getting honorably discharged from the military for not completing the Army substance abuse program, because after I broke my hand and part of me getting that UCMJ against me, I had to go to the Army substance abuse program. And if you get in trouble at all, they recommend a discharge after that. And so I had got in trouble again. I got caught drinking again. And because I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to let anybody tell me what to do. Just was very stupid of me. But I was just not I was not mature enough to realize what I was doing. And they discharged me from the military. And I received all of my benefits and everything, because I never had a DUI. I never got in any trouble. The only trouble I had gotten in was the Article 15 for breaking my hand, and that was it. And it was a company grade deal. It wasn't even, it actually leaves your record after you go to your next unit. So it wasn't permanent. It's not on any of my military paperwork. All of my military records are completely clear of any trouble or time lost or anything like that. But because I had the drinking issue, they discharged me. And at the time, it was a very frustrating thing. It made me really angry. And I got out of the military, and then I had to deal with all of that, the guilt that comes with, throwing away the dream that I had of being in the military. And then 6 months, not even 6 months after I got out, my best friend was killed in Iraq. And when that happened, that caused a whole nother level of guilt that I had, because I wasn't there. And this is a guy, I mean, that we went to basic training together. And when basic training for the infantry it's not like normal basic training. It's normal basic training is 9 weeks, and then you have like a week off, and then you go to your tech school and they teach you. Well, in the infantry, you go into the infantry school from basically day one, and you spend 18 weeks together. And so it's just infantry school all the way through. And I went home to Washington, the Seattle area, after basic, said hi to my family, and then I flew to St. Louis, met with Austin and two other guys that we went to basic with, and drove to Fort Polk together to report. And so this is someone that I was close to. And when he got killed, it was just a very difficult time for me. I was very angry with the world and everything, because I had to now deal with the loss of my friend, and going to his funeral and seeing his family, seeing his mother and his father and his brothers and his sisters. And I really felt guilty for not being there, at least when it happened. Or not that I could have changed anything, but that guilt that I had was very, very difficult to deal with, and that caused me to have a lot of problems for the next 5 years. So from 21 until 20, 25, 25, 26 years of age, I was in a very dark place, and had to kind of climb my way out of that. Dealt with, I quit drinking liquor when I got out of the military, and just stuck to drinking beer and smoking pot. And it was hard. So I spent those few years in a very tough spot. I had met my ex-wife right when I got out of the military. She had a son who was 2.5, and we met on New Year's, and then within weeks she was pregnant, and then unintentional, obviously. And I tried to do the right thing, we moved in together, and I was like, well, she's having my child. And she has this other child. And so when she moved in, I took her son on as my own son and have treated him that way ever since. I legally adopted him when he was 3. And then me and her split up. He was 5 when we split up. My youngest daughter was about 18 months old, I think, when we split up. And I've had custody of them ever since. And um, those my children, specifically my 2 oldest kids, were the only thing that really kept me alive during that period of time, because um, I didn't want to damage them by killing myself, which I probably would have if I didn't have kids, because I thought about it often. But I also thought about, I didn't want my kids to think that there was something wrong with them, or that they were the reason at all for that, and I obviously couldn't justify that, and there is no justification for that. So they really kept me alive. And then I met my current wife in Utah, and we've um, been married for 12 years, and we have 2 beautiful daughters together as well. And yeah, so we've been together for 14 years. And from basically that point on, when I met her, everything got better. I was able to, and part of it too is growing up and getting perspective and experience, and learning about yourself and what life is. And so we have 2 daughters. Our youngest is 9, and our oldest daughter is 11. And then my son graduated high school last year, and my oldest daughter is 15 and on the varsity basketball team, and really thriving. And in 2016, my youngest daughter was 2, and she was diagnosed with cancer. I was playing with her downstairs in our living room, and I saw something in her eye. I was spinning her around, and the light just caught it. And I asked my wife, I said, hey, have you ever noticed this like little white spot in Lily's eye? And she's like, no, I haven't noticed, but I'll, if I see it, whatever. And then a day later, I was playing with her again, and I could see it. And I was like, wow, this is strange. And then I realized she couldn't see out of that eye at that moment. I was like, wait a minute. So I sat her down in my lap, and Lily is very, very smart. She is just an amazing soul. I sat her down in my lap, and we had already started learning flashcards. So she knew all the bits. She knew 1 through 10. She knew colors and everything. So, and I could mix up the cards, and she could do the alphabet out of order. And so I sat her in my lap, and I covered her right eye and started doing the flashcards, and she was naming them off. And so then I took my hand off of her right eye and put it over her left eye, and she started pulling at my hand. And that's when I realized, I was like, oh wow, she can't see out of this eye. So I was thinking maybe, she's just blind in this eye, or there's something going on. So we took her to the pediatrician next day, and he was like, I could tell right away he was seriously concerned.
Yeah.
And so that following day after that, we were at a ophthalmologist's office, and ophthalmologist, and she basically just diagnosed her right there on the spot with cancer. And it was very it was like I didn't understand what she was saying. I had to stop her, and I was like, you're throwing all of these big words around, and I don't really understand what you're saying to me. I'm like, does my kid have cancer? And she said, yes, she has retinoblastoma. It's rare. It's like 1 in 22 million kids are diagnosed with it. I believe it's very, very rare cancer. And it all happened very fast after that. Within 2 weeks, so we went in the next day and did all this imaging, and then we had to make the decision. It was not in her left eye; it was only in her right eye, and we were basically given kind of an ultimatum by the ophthalmologist, who said, you can do chemo if you want, but the chances of you getting everything is not high. And it's a ticking time bomb at that point. Her eye is a time bomb. And she's like, so if you wanted to go that route, then I'll refer you to somebody else. I won't do it because I don't believe it's the right way. Or we can remove her eye. We take the optic nerve and we send it off for testing and all of that. And so it was not a difficult decision for me, if I'm being totally honest. It was like, hey, just do it. Let's remove it. I don't want there to be any chance, because if it gets the optic nerve, then we're going to have to do chemotherapy and there's potential for brain cancer and all of these things. So I scheduled the surgery. And by the time she got into the surgery, it was like 3 weeks after the start of this whole thing. The tumor had completely doubled in size and had completely detached the whole interior of her eye, all the structure of her retina and everything. So it was a very aggressive cancer, and we got it in time. Luckily, she didn't have to do any chemotherapy or anything like that. And so it was just a real blessing that she didn't have to go through all of that. Make-A-Wish had sent us to Disney World because she wanted to see Elsa, and she's all about Frozen. And so we were in Disney World, and we went to the Frozen show, and it was like there was this moment watching my little girl stand up and sing Let It Go at this show, where she was just so ecstatic and so happy to be there. And I was thinking about that, and I was just instantly thinking about the day after we brought her home from the surgery. She had, this giant compression bandage on her head, and she was on the couch singing and dancing, and I was just like, wow, I would be like licking my wounds for weeks about this, sulking on the couch, and I don't know that I could be so positive after going through something like that. And so I made that decision that when I got home, I was going to quit my job and start my business, because for one, I just recognized that life is really short. I had already lost my best friend. And then in between that, a lot of people that I was in the military with had killed themselves over the course of the last decade. There's probably been about one a year. Wow. People that I either served with or knew personally that have killed themselves. And so there was a lot going on, and I just realized I'm not living my life to my fullest potential. And if my 2-year-old daughter can be singing and dancing the day after having her eye removed, why am I not living my life to the fullest potential and just going after these things that I'm either afraid to do or putting off because it might be a lot of work? So when we got back to Arizona, I quit my job. I put my 2 weeks notice in. I had gone to school. I was a lead technician and fast tracking into a foreman spot. My boss was not happy with me at all. Told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. And I told them, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I have to go out on my own, and I have to do this. And so I quit my job. My wife was super supportive. She's like, my wife is an angel. She really is the most supportive person. She has followed me everywhere that I wanted to go. When we came to Arizona, I had crashed a dirt bike before we came to Arizona, and I was in a wheelchair for like 3 months. And we were laying in bed because I couldn't really do anything else. And a commercial came on, and it was an advertisement for a school that I had applied to before I joined the Army. And I said, I was going to go to that technical school before I joined the Army back in 2003, but I went in the Army instead. And she's like, well, why don't you call them? So I did. This is what brought us to Arizona. So I did, and signed up the paperwork. And she was like, well, so we're going to go to Arizona then. And I had moved my whole family back into my house because I couldn't work. I didn't have any money or anything. And so we took the last $2,000 we had, and put a house, called someone on Craigslist and said, please don't take my money, but I want to rent this house. And then got a U-Haul, packed everything we could fit, and left Washington. So that my wife has been the most supportive person in the world. She's down for those things. And we've built a life here in Arizona because she is so supportive. So she was supportive when I quit my job, and my business was a wild success for the first couple of years. I replaced my income completely in the first 3 months of quitting my job.
Wow.
Yeah, it was most people don't have that story when they start a
No.
business. They have like grind and sleep on the floor and scramble to pay bills and all of these things. But I had to burn the boats in my life and put my back against the wall to start this business and to really get after it. And of course, having all the inspiration from my daughter and all of the things, that had happened prior to that to just really push me to not take no for an answer, and also to understand that things do work out. And if I really want this, I can go and get it. The world really is your oyster. And so I replaced all of my income within the first 3 months of starting my business. I went from zero pool accounts, a swimming pool company, maintenance and repair. I worked for a swimming pool builder up in Washington State, doing technical work for them, replacing pumps, installing automation, some plumbing and stuff like that. So I started my pool company here, zero maintenance accounts, monthly accounts, to 80 in 3 months. And then within 2 years, I had sold half of the company's equity to another guy, and we bought out another pool company. And at the height of it, we had 350 monthly pool accounts year round. So we would go out every week and service their pools. I had 5 technicians, but the company we had bought out kind of misrepresented the deal to us. And the technicians that he had working for him that we brought on were actually stealing from him, now stealing from us.
Oh.
And yeah, it ended up being a real nightmare pretty fast. I remember it was so the juxtaposition from the day that we signed the contract of buying out that company. I was so excited. I was so proud of everything. I just could not believe that here I am for $250,000 buying another company. I've never had more. Before I started my pool company, there was never a period. There's one period in time where I had more than $10,000, and that was when I got my reenlistment bonus in the Army. But I have never had the kind of money that I was making. I had never had anything like that. I grew up in we didn't have money growing up. I wore clothes from the thrift store. I wore hand-me-downs from other families because I was the oldest boy, so we didn't really have a hand-me-down for me, but from my
Yeah.
family. So it was such a big accomplishment from me. And then juxtaposed, just like 6 months later, everything is just completely crumbling. And my business partner, unfortunately, was struggling with alcohol and pills, and was just collapsing under the weight of everything. And his personal life was suffering from it too. And him and his wife ended up getting divorced. And there was a point in the business where we were just drowning financially. And he called me one day and he said, hey, we need $10,000 by Friday to pay everybody. And I said, well, how much money's in the account? Because I was working like 90-hour weeks and doing all of these installs and sales and everything. And he's like, well, there's no money in the account. And this is like on a Monday. And so I was like, what do you mean there's no money in the account? And he told me that, well, there's about $45,000 past due in accounts receivable. So that are older than 90 days. So he hadn't been collecting money. He hadn't been following up with people. So we have invoices that are over 90 days old to the amount of $45,000. And I was like, well, what have you been doing? And there was just a lot of finger pointing and excuse making going on. I knew right at that point, I was like, I have to kick him out of the business.
Mm-hmm.
I made the $10,000 that week, paid everybody. And then I hadn't kicked him out yet, and then it happened again.
Mm.
And I was like, all right, well, this is it. And I didn't know what to do at that point. And it was actually kind of this pretty amazing moment, because I was going through all of these training courses through Jesse Elder, and this is kind of when I joined the Legacy group and started to go down this path, and really like hacking reality.
Mhm.
Because when my wife and I first got together, we lived kind of in the hood down in Washington. And there was a day that I was really stressed out about money. And I just was like, I can't take this anymore. I'm like, why do I even get stressed about this? Money comes easy. It goes easy, but it comes easy. Things always work out. And I looked at my wife and I was like, money comes easy. This is going to be fine. And then within a couple of weeks, I had a check in the mail. And then we would joke and we would say that every time things would get tight, we'd be like, money comes easy. And we would get like an overage payment from an insurance company, you know? So the second time that this is happening where I need $10,000, and it's like a couple of days, like I have a couple of days to make 10,000 to pay everybody.
Mhm.
Um, I was really stressed out, and I go to my mailbox to get the mail, and something I kind of avoided doing, because at that point the bills were piling up and I hadn't paid myself in at least 2 or 3 months. But there was a card inside the mail from my grandmother in Canada, who I haven't talked to since I was a child. I mean, she lives in Canada. We really didn't talk to that side of the family growing up. We did a little when my father was in prison. She came and visited us. But I just started shaking. I just, there was something about this card, and it made me shake. I just started like trembling. And when I got into the house, I opened the card, and a check for $10,000 fell out of it. And sorry, I'm get a little choked up just even talking about this, because it was such a monumental shift for me at that point, because this check fell on the ground and I looked down and I saw it was $10,000. And I never had any money, growing up. I didn't have a rich family or anything like that. My grandfather had died when I was about 5 years old, so I didn't know him. I vaguely remember sitting on his lap a couple of times as like a toddler. And this card said, basically, I hope you're doing well. I waited to send you this money because you needed. I wanted to make sure you got it in a time in life when you really could use it and knew how to use it.
Mm.
And so it was an inheritance from my grandfather passing away when I was 5, and that at that point I was like, all right, it's time for me to take control of all this. Um, and I paid the bills and took care of business that I needed to take care of. And from that point on, I kicked my business partner out of the business. I was already embroiled in this lawsuit with the guy that we bought out, because I tried to renegotiate the deal with him, and it wasn't working. And he wasn't taking renegotiation from me. So we ended up suing each other. I ran out of money and lost the lawsuit, but I managed to protect my income. And this was in 2019, and when it basically came to an end. And I protected my income, protected myself, sold basically everything off. And then I spent 2 years hanging out with my kids at home. It was, living off of the money that I got from selling the business off. And I kept a small number of accounts that took me about 20 hours a week to take care of. And I took a little mini retirement and just hung with my kids for 2 years. And because COVID was going on, so they were home from school,
Yeah.
and I took that 2 years to just really focus on my family and my life and the things that I want, and to figure out how I was going to rebuild my life. And in October, well, in just November of officially in November of 2019, I quit drinking completely. It was really kind of October, but someone bought me a beer on my birthday in November, and I took like 3 drinks of it and put it down. But I quit drinking alcohol, and because while one of the things I didn't mention, while everything was going on with my business partner, I was struggling with alcohol as well. I was keeping everything together. I was a functional alcoholic, but I would drink 3 Bloody Marys at breakfast, which would get most people drunk, but it wouldn't get me drunk. It would just got me where I needed to be. And then beer at lunch and beer after work, like a case of beer a day. And so um, my service tech that was working for me, who's also my best friend down here, he would just drive me around all day because I couldn't. I mean, he's like, "Oh, you're definitely not driving." But so anyway, I quit drinking alcohol in 2019 November, and I've been sober ever since. My business currently is absolutely thriving. Well, I'm so busy right now. My brother moved here a year ago. I brought him on, and he helps me take care of all the maintenance side of things. And we're very busy. The business is very good. I've been working on this.
Is it just you and your brother in the business now?
It is just me and my brother in the business now. We did hire someone. We did hire someone back in February, but I've got a pretty high standard for what we do, and especially having gone through everything I went through with technicians that were being lazy, cutting corners, calling in sick, or stealing. I decided in that 2-year period, if I was ever going to of it just hanging out, if I was ever going to build this back up, I was going to keep a very high standard, and I was never going to be held hostage to technicians that lie to me. And I was really going to be customer focused and make sure that my customers are my number one priority, because some of the things that I learned, you get to a certain size, and if a technician calls out sick, it just screws everything up. Or if they're cutting corners and customers start to cancel, and you want to believe your customer, but you also don't want to lose a technician, and you want to give your technician the benefit of the doubt. But there's also this little part of you that knows, he probably didn't brush the pool.
Mm-hmm.
But am I going to reprimand him and then have him potentially get mad and quit? And then now what? I've got 80 more pools that I've got to take care of on top of all these things. I decided that I was going to hold a high standard. I'll never be hostage to a customer or to my technicians ever again. And that I would rather be quality over quantity. So we don't take, I probably won't, I don't foresee us having 350 pools again, because I don't know that the quality of service will be to the standard that we want. I was able to apply that, and with this technician that we hired, it just wasn't quite working out. And so I just said, hey, these are the things. And my brother actually let him go. And so we're and if we're okay with it, like when the right technician comes along, we'll hire the right technician, but our customers come first. Our service to our customers comes first. And if we don't, if a technician can't live up to that standard, we're not gonna, we pay very well. So you're gonna have to earn that pay and be honest and have integrity. And those are just some of the things that coming out of all of that I learned about running a good business, providing a good service. Who you hire really matters. The culture that you build within your company really matters, because outside of your company, you don't want to be thinking about everything going on inside of your company. When you want to be able to shut that off from time to time, and be able to enjoy your life and not be the 24/7, did this happen? Did that happen? Is this getting taken care of? But anyways,
yeah.
So it is just me and my brother right now. But we are at a point where I'm going to be handling all of the new construction, plumbing and equipment installs, and he'll be handling the service side of things. And so we're going to have to bring people on for the plumbing, because we're doing this lazy river and pool that it's a 63,000 gallon lazy river and a 10,000 gallon pool and spa in this guy's backyard. He's a very cool guy. But it's a big project. It's the biggest project I've ever been a part of or on, even when I worked for the pool builder. And so we're going to expand that division of the company. So we're going to be hiring some pool plumbers and some people for that, and maybe buy some equipment to do this, like an excavator. And it's not something I was sure I would be doing a year ago. Just because, life takes you some interesting places, but it's definitely something that I wanted to do. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be given to me, but there's a mindset shift that took place where I can have it all, if I believe I can have it all. And if you are stressing on the universe or the world that this isn't working out, or that's not working out, or it's not going the way that I want it to go, well, you're just telling the universe that this is how you want it to be. You want it to not work out. You want it to go that way or this way. When really, if you just kind of change your mindset to, all right, we're going to see how this works out. It's going to work out. And having an abundance mindset and being open to these things, like this project fell in my lap. And the reason it fell in my lap was because the other people this guy had talked to kind of got scared of this project. And because it's a very big project, it's a $250,000 project. And my name got tossed in the hat. He heard my name from another person that recommended. He said, "Hey, this guy knows how to plumb and do equipment and everything." And he called me up and I said, "I'm not scared of it. Let's do it." Say
Yeah.
yes, even though I was nervous. I'm not going to lie. Like when he said Lazy River and I went and looked at it, I was like, oh, wow, this is a big project. This is bigger than the other two projects that we completed. But I was not going to say no to it. I was going to say, all right, let's see how this goes. It's going to work out. And so far, it's been great. And now we have 6 more pool builds in the pipeline that are going to be very crazy, no budget pools. So we're going to be able to put all of the best equipment and water features. And it just seems to be taking us in that direction. We've got a lot of work coming up. So the business is thriving. Our life is thriving. My wife graduated with her master's 2 weeks ago in accounting. That was another thing. Through all of this, my wife had been going to school, got her undergraduate degree, became an accountant, has been an accountant for about 5 years now, just got her master's. So in all of everything that was going on, she's been a huge inspiration to me because she put her head down and full-time mom, full-time employee, and full-time student. And really inspired me. I'm like, dang, if this chick can do all of that, I need to keep my butt in gear and do more on my end. So
I want to ask you, as a father, like you have a son and then 3 daughters. What do you think is important for your son? He's 19, you said, so like you've been in the military a couple of years by then. What's your like dream for him or vision for him, or what do you hope he has that you didn't at that age?
that's something I try to answer all the time. Actually, I wanted him to have more opportunity than I had. As far as I didn't want him to, his dream was not to join the military. Like that's not his dream.
Mm-hmm.
It was very much my dream, but it was also kind of something out of like, necessity almost. Like I'm sure my life would have headed that way anyway because I didn't have a lot of options. Um, I want him to be able to do what he wants to do. I want him to obviously go and try things. I want him to try things, he's not sure what he wants to do. So I encourage him to just like go, if you don't want to do this, then go try something else. It might not be what you want to do, but you might find that you love it, or it might open up a door to somewhere else. Because when I got out of the military, I was an electrician. My dad's an electrician. We went and worked for this. I worked for the same company he did. And then in 2008, the economy tanked and I found myself kind of bumping around. I unloaded trucks at Target in Utah in logistics. I installed satellite dish and then tried to get back on as an electrician, then found myself working for a pool builder. And so changing things up worked out for me, and I went to school, become a diesel mechanic, and was a diesel mechanic for almost 4 years, and then started my pool company. So I don't want him to be pigeonholed into anything, but I want him to do the things that he wants to do. And I've also told him, hey, you only get to live this once. So if there's something you want to go and do it. Like, don't be afraid to go and do it. Don't worry about making mistakes or financial costs of things. Things work out, like go and take those risks now while you're younger and that you can do it. And
Yeah,
find out what it is that you want to do. The last thing you want to do is go to school for 4 years and get a degree in something that you absolutely hate,
totally.
So
I have my oldest son is 21, and when he was in grade 10, he took me aside one day and he was like, "Listen, I've been telling everybody that I'm planning to go to university, but I do not want to go to university." And he wanted to study business. He was like, "Why would I go to university and study business from a professor who makes less than 100K per year when I could just go and like start my own business and fail many times until I succeed?" Or and so
yeah.
he left high school early. He graduated in like, he did grade 12 online in like a month, then started his own business. And now he's 21. He's on his third business. And my middle son, who's 16, works for him now. They live together in Brazil and they work together. It's like totally the
Oh
dreams.
wow.
Yeah, when you were sharing about having your brother come and work and just like that standard of excellence that you're both committed to, and like I totally get it, because for my oldest son, they also have a business partner who's my oldest son's best friend, but they just like, it's so amazing for them because they have like the same vision, same values. It's just like they get up, they train together, they work out together, and then they work all day. Like they love
Yeah.
it. It's like
I
such a
think
great environment.
I think
Yeah.
so. I mean, there's this like adage that you shouldn't do business with family, and I that might be true sometimes, but and it obviously every family is different, but if you trust your brother or your family member, like I would rather do business with people that have my best interest at heart, where I have my brother's best interest at heart. And I know when he's in situations out there, he's got my best interest at heart too. So we're not going to screw each other. And that's not true for every family, but I've done business outside of the family and I got screwed pretty hard. So, doing business I'd rather do business with my family because we legitimately care for each other.
Yeah.
And, like I think that's awesome about your sons doing business together and working out together and doing all of those things. That's pretty awesome. So kudos to him, 21
It
and
was his
business
dream,
owner.
actually. If I mean, you're familiar with Jesse's work. I think I met Jesse around the same time as you, actually, following your timeline. But my oldest son, it was like his dream. Like when the year that I got divorced was the same year that he finished high school early, started his own business. He would get up, he stopped drinking that year and was like, he went into monk mode, as he called it. Spent a
Mm-hmm.
year just like getting up early. He'd write out his dream 3 times a day, same dream. Like, and then that dream came true. And then there was another dream. And then, like it's been really neat to see somebody of his age have the same sort of information that I access through like Jesse and others. But like to have that happen I like, for him it was like 17 or 18, and then now my middle son as well. Like I feel so excited about this generation of kids. Like I feel like they have, yeah, I mean, also the world is like totally crazy, and I'm like, I'm sorry
Oh,
you're growing up in this, but like they seem to have the ones who are dialed in, they're so dialed in. Like my oldest son is an entrepreneur. We started our entrepreneurial journey at the same time. And like I ask him for advice all the time. Like he's got a great mind for it. He's like very logical and just like, he's always like, everything's always working out for him. But that was a
that's
dream. A
awesome.
couple of years ago, he wanted to live in a household with other young men who like, they all had the same like focus and drive and like being really strong physically and mentally and in their businesses and like not partying too much. Like it was like
Yeah.
he created that, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that this generation of people, I mean, the world is crazy, but if you're going to raise warriors, it's not going to happen in, peaceful times. These times we're living in are pretty crazy, but having a good support like you, and even like with my son, he would get upset with me because be like, why are you always trying to turn things into a lesson and this and that? And
Mhm.
I'm like, look, no one was telling me this stuff growing up. No one. I was told at a young age that I was going to grow up, go to a trade school, be an electrician, be a carpenter, and then that's the extent to the life that I'm going to have. That these things, these wild dreams of having your own business and trying to, carve a life outside of just being a blue collar worker is not for you, right? Like, I didn't have anyone saying that to me when I was 18, 19 years old, where it was like, hey, if you go and do this and you believe it and you persevere and you like have persistence about this, like you can really create an amazing life for yourself. You can go out, especially in today's world where there's a lot of people that unfortunately have fallen victim to this mentality that they can't have this thing, or that they need to depend on. One of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is when I'll read something about a disgruntled employee, and the attitude is that they don't have any other options. They have to work for Walmart or they have to work for Amazon. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, you have a choice. You can
Yeah.
leave that. And it might not feel like much of a choice to you because leaving that quote unquote security of a job, which isn't security at all. I mean, your job can be decided in 5 minutes over a 15-minute lunch break when, the director of so and so says, well, we need to cut 15% here. Where can we do it? Well, let's cut these guys, right? That's not security. It might not
Yeah.
feel like much of a choice to leave that behind and go and carve your own path, but it is a choice. And if you're miserable working where you're working, I mean, choose your hard, choose your misery. I'd rather be miserable on my own, and especially going out on my own and working for myself. Like, I can't go and work for somebody else ever again. Like, there's
Yeah.
just no way for me. I'm unemployable at this point. It's hard being an entrepreneur, being a
Yeah.
business owner, but my income comes from multiple places now. It's not coming from one source that can lord over me. And when I read these about these people who are upset with their job, it's like, oh man, if you only knew how much power you had as an individual to go and create the life that you want, especially now. I
Mhm.
mean, there's so many things that you can do from the palm of your hand with a cell phone, and create a life that you want. I generated all of my business from my cell phone. When I first started my business, I documented it all on Facebook, from quitting my job to starting the pool company. And people would call me and I would do jobs and take videos and post them and pictures. And I still do it. And people, I was just asked to go look at a pool remodel from my Instagram story because I posted up about this lazy river that we're doing, And so if people understood the power that they actually have as an individual, like, man, you don't have to be miserable working
No.
for so and so,
My
and
my dream would be for kids, like rather than going through traditional high school, especially, was like at a certain age, like I don't know if it's like grade 6 or grade 8 or what that would be, but like everybody has to go be an entrepreneur. Like go create something,
yeah,
understand what the value is that it provides for others, and go sell it. Because those are, like that's the study my oldest has been in, is studying sales. My middle son is studying coding, like so he's learning how to do all that stuff. These are skills that, like, I was explaining it to my dad because my middle son didn't finish high school. And I'm totally fine with that. My dad was like, like, he might need that. I'm like, let me explain this to you. First of all, he's already been a mechanic. He knows how to fix vehicles. Like, he's got all these like real life tangible skills.
hmm,
Now he's learning how to code. And it took a while, and my dad got it. Like, he was like, but from that generation, it's such a big deal. You don't finish high school, they're like, you're never going to amount to anything. Like, in
oh
fact,
yeah,
my son was getting emails from the like education, distant learning education thing that would show him, based on his current grades, what jobs he would be capable of getting, like cashier. Like, and he showed me, it was like a joke, right? Like, here we are when he was like 12, fixing cars, working for a mechanic, having a great time, like still going to school at that point. But it really shows you how much school is like grooming you and preparing you to be reliant on working for someone else, because you don't have
Yeah.
the most important skills, which are like selling, marketing, the simple organic selling, marketing, like you posting this cool project you're about to start on your Instagram story, and someone else is like, wait, me too, I want that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think school definitely cultivates cogs for the machine. I mean, just my experience with school, I wasn't ever I was never meant to be a cog in a machine, you know. But if you're not someone that's going to be the cog, they try to make you the cog, either by putting you onto medicine or putting you, quote unquote medicine, or putting you into special programs. And then it's just, we're not all going to be entrepreneurs. We're not all going to be creators, but the school system definitely has a way of stifling creativity and innovation and ambition in people to go and take those chances on things. And it's unfortunate. I kind of, in my opinion, I don't think school should be is really necessary after like the 8th grade. It just, unless you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, some special field of study. I don't see it as a necessary. It doesn't, for one, guarantee your success. You can go to college, get a degree, and not be successful. I mean, that is an unfortunate reality of the education system. But you don't have to go to college to be successful. And that is something that is harped on us growing up. Like when I dropped, my mom was the one that told me to drop out of high school. And I'm grateful that she did that,
yeah.
because, had I tried to stick that out, and maybe they would have just given me a diploma. I mean, the schools, they just do that now, where they just, all right, you've made it to the 12th grade, even though you didn't really do anything. Here's your participation trophy in the form of a diploma. I
Yeah.
mean, we read these stories out of some of these states like Oregon and California, that kids are graduating with a diploma and they can't do basic math or spell, and that's not really an education. That's not helping anybody. I mean, you don't need it necessarily to be successful. And in my own life, that's been my experience. I've been able to create a life and a business without that college degree. And, if my kids don't get a college degree, it's not going to hurt my feelings. My son, I told him before he graduated, I said, if you don't want to go to college, that's fine. I'm not going to push you to go to college, especially not to get hooked on, $100,000 in student loan debt for something that isn't necessarily going to make you happy or fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather you figure out what you want to do and then decide, well, do I need a degree for this? Is this specialized? Am I going to be a marine biologist, or am I going to open up a music shop, or,
Mm-hmm.
some other service? So if you're going to go be an entrepreneur, go be an entrepreneur. Don't, like you said, go to take classes from some professor that's never made 6 figures a year, or maybe he makes 6 figures a year because he's got tenure, but has never actually ran a successful business. Um, I would encourage people, go and get a business coach. If you're going to spend the
Mm-hmm.
money on an education, go pay someone to teach you who's actually done it. You might not get a fancy diploma from ASU Business School, but you're getting real experience and real knowledge from people that actually know how the markets really work, not just on paper and in theory. So those are the things I encourage to like my own kids. Get real world experience, and go that path. I mean, that's what I've done. I mean, I've paid coaches to teach me these things, and that's my education. The education of hard knocks, going through business and signing up for deals that I really wanted but probably weren't the best for me, and then realizing, okay, well, this this was my master's degree in business right here that I just paid for going through this whole ordeal, like, all
Yeah.
right, I got it. It's under my belt. I'm never going to make those mistakes again. But I possibly learned what I learned unless I went through all of that on my own. You don't have to,
Yeah.
go through all of that to learn. Some of us learn a little bit harder than others. That was my education. Yeah.
Well,
So
even there's such an emphasis on, like, I notice because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and I am an entrepreneur myself and see all my own limitations. There's such an emphasis on, which I think is something we learn in school, that like, if you don't do it right, you're doing it wrong. Whereas like, if you normalize like making mistakes and then looking at your mistake and making it better and like learning from your mistakes, and like that crashed and this didn't go how I wanted. Like, if you have a different approach about that and you're looking at each of those as like opportunity and necessary aspects of growth, then it's very different. I notice a lot of entrepreneurs will freeze in their journey because they're like, they expect that it should go like like a ladder. Like if you were going to university and then climbing a corporate ladder, that it should be like this. Whereas the entrepreneurial journey is like, like, I don't
it's
know.
a mountain.
Yeah.
It's a mountain with hills. There's ups, there's downs, there's, and then you get to one hilltop and you realize, oh, over there's that hilltop and that's really where I want to be. So now I got to go back down and up and down and sideways and left and right to get to that top of that mountain. Then you get there and you're like, okay, well, there's that mountain over there. I got to go climb that one. That is, there is no real just straight ladder to the top. And then even when, if there was, you would get to the top and it probably wouldn't be, you wouldn't be fulfilled by it. I don't think, so, and plus here's the other thing in that journey and in that process of making those mistakes, there's some pain involved with that. But you're building something. You're like, if you're bodybuilding and you're building muscle, like there's pain involved in that. But at the end of it, like you're building yourself into something that you weren't before. And all of those lessons and that little bit of pain that comes with, if there wasn't a little bit of pain with it, you wouldn't learn from those mistakes. And dead fish float downstream. So if you're going to try to do everything right and do what everybody says, you're just a dead fish, in my opinion. So swim upstream, do the unconventional, try different things. Nobody's gotten anywhere or done anything great or important without taking a step back and going, well, everyone's doing it this way. What if I try it this way? That's how innovation happens. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. That's how amazing things do happen. So you have to make those mistakes. You have to mess with the process. You have to try things. And if you don't, you're either going to fail or you're not going to thrive, so it's an important part of building the muscle of being an entrepreneur, is those making those mistakes and learning from them.
Yeah, totally. And like learning to really love or embrace the process. Like I 2 years ago, I started training jujitsu. This is a bit of a tangent, but it's very related to entrepreneurship. And like at the beginning, I was like, nothing was working. Like it was just, you're very, like when you first started, I've talked to many people about for their first experiences in jujitsu, for example. And yeah, they're like, there's this underlying desire to make it less hard or like to just get better at it because it's so challenging, right? And then you start to gain some traction and you're like, oh wow, that submission worked, or like, oh, I managed to pull off that sweep we learned last week. Like you're getting these like, but I remember reading this quote that was like, jiu-jitsu is supposed to suck 80% of the time. Like that is the formula. And so I think, we have this idea that like, oh, it should be easy, rather than being like, no, actually the experience we're in where we're getting to solve all these problems daily as entrepreneurs or jiu-jitsu practitioners, that's actually like, that becomes really fun. And there's like that hunger and drive and excitement and enthusiasm that's there, rather than like, oh no, I just got slept. Now like I can't, like the worst thing you could do is stop moving at that time or stop trying.
Yeah.
Now I got to try harder and like give it more, like try something different and put my feet in a different place, or, approach from a different angle. So yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes those successes so much more meaningful when
Mhm.
it was hard to get there. I mean, facing adversity, it grows. Like it grows who you are. It makes things more fulfilling. Weightlifting, right? Like when you start lifting weights and bodybuilding or whatever, you're like, man, this is going to be easy one day, right? Like when you first start and you're pushing the weight up and you're like, we have this weird reasoning in humans where we just want to make things easier, but that's really not the answer. When weightlifting, it's the same thing where there's never no easy. It's like, oh, okay, now benching 225 is easy. So now I need to bench 245 and then 255. Like there's never going to be a point where it is easy. It should always be hard, and you should always be challenging yourself to improve. And that's just everything in life, and because if you're not doing that, you're not growing, and people can be complacent and just meander by life if they want, but that's not the life that I want. And I've always wanted an interesting life. And when I was a kid, I used to pray for wisdom. And this was something that came to me, a realization that I had in the last year, because it was something that, for whatever reason, it was just, I grew up in a very Christian, Church of Christ household. So I was raised in the Bible verses Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights, weekend devotionals, summer camps, all of it. And I used to pray for wisdom. And when I was kind of evaluating my life and all of these things and all this adversity that I had been through, whether it was self-inflicted or out of my control, I realized this last year, I was like, oh, I actually prayed for all of this. I asked for all of these things, because
Yeah.
if I hadn't gone through all of these things in my life, it wouldn't have given me the wisdom that I am obtaining, and the wisdom that I'll have when I actually meet the man that I am in my deathbed. And the man that I meet in my deathbed is a wise man, and you have to go through all of these difficulties and make all of these mistakes in order to gain that wisdom. So that was a realization and revelation that I had over this last year about my own life, and it applies to everything. If you're going to be a wise businessman, a wise businesswoman or entrepreneur, you're going to have to face adversity and make mistakes and feel a little bit of the sting, but then
Mhm.
go, okay, I'm going to get back on my feet and I'm going to keep moving, because if I don't, this person's going to choke me.
Yeah,
So you have to do that. So
totally. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you link it back to being a kid and praying for wisdom. And, I think about these, when the act of prayer can be setting into motion your own initiation into yourself, or your own initiation into like experiencing the creative forces of the universe. And so we have an idea of what that looks like. Like I bet as a kid, you had this idea of wisdom that you associated probably with someone or something that was like you knew you wanted it, but you
mhm.
probably weren't planning out the path that was like, then this is going to happen, and then I'm going to battle with that, and then my daughter's going to go through this, and like all these experiences that build that. We don't choose our own initiations, right? They're like it's like going in dark or going in blind, I mean, into an experience that is forming us to be who we are, but we don't get to choose necessarily like what that exactly looks like. Sometimes some of them we do, but you know.
Yeah, no, I think that me personally, in my own path, in my own reflections of life, um, I don't regret any of it. I used to regret dropping out of high school, and I used to regret the way that I got out of the military, and these things that had happened, but I don't anymore, because everything that has happened in my life has had to happen for me. I used to think that things were happening to me, but the reality is things are happening for me. They're happening for me to become who I am to become. And, I don't take any of it back anymore. I don't regret any of it. Even all of the pain that came along with a lot of the experiences that I've been through, all of it had to happen. And I don't know what the future has in store for me. I really don't. But I'm not afraid of the future either, and I'm not afraid to face adversity. I actually am able to look at things a lot differently now because of all of the experiences in my life. And things don't stress me out. I'm not stressed anymore about stuff. And I had to go through a high amount of stress in order to get to the point where I look at things and I go, it could be worse, and it's fine. So all of this has happened for me. Whatever happens in the future is happening for me. And I'm grateful for all of it. I would not be who I am today. I would not be where I am at today if I had not faced all of the things that I have faced in my life, whether they were self-inflicted or not. It is exactly as it should be. So, and I also believe, the beginning and the end has already happened, and I am in the middle of it. Going through Jesse Elder's stuff, one of the realizations that I came to, or one of my own personal beliefs that I developed, was that coming from a religious background, God created the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day, God rested. But on the eighth day, God experienced all of his creation. And we are that eighth day experiencing everything that God created. And we should just be grateful to be here and experience it. Because one of the things that Jesse taught us is that, one of the things that he used to say is, well, what do you give somebody that has everything and has it all and isn't satisfied by anything? Well, you give them amnesia, right? You make them forget so they can rediscover. And so here we are in the eighth day, discovering all of the splendors of life and everything that comes with it. And to be a full spectrum human being, that doesn't mean that you're happy and bubbly all the time and that every day is wonderful and great. You have to have the bad in order to experience the good, but understanding that it's all part of the same thing. It all comes from the same place, and it's all just a degree on the same spectrum, like it's just, where is it? Gives a little bit, it makes life a little easier to go through. And, that's kind of where I've come. I'm not a religious person anymore. I'm a very spiritual person, and have a very deep belief in God. And, but that's just kind of part of the reflections that I've come across going through Jesse's teachings, going through even some of the other coaches, and in my own religious upbringing and experience. And I've studied religion, and it's actually one of my favorite things to do is read about different religions and different beliefs. And so that's something.
It's interesting here, like just you describing the eighth day, and like us, being in this human experience. This morning in the guided journey that I hosted, which is essentially like you go into this like realm, and you're meeting with your younger self, you're meeting with your future self. It's a really fun experience, but it starts with this journey like into the mind, into the heart, through a portal. Then you're floating like in the sky, like completely untethered. You can't feel gravity at all. You're just like separate. And then there's a moment where I guide people to see a planet in the distance that feels familiar. And it's like this slow, like coming through the stars and then landing on Earth. And I've led this meditation many times before, but when I was leading it today, I like almost felt like I was going to burst into tears, realizing that because this meditation just came to me one day, like it just was like as I was talking, but I've been teaching it quite a bit since then, or facilitating it would be more accurate. But in that moment, it's like I realized, I was like, I feel like I'm helping people fall in love with being human in that moment, like because it's just like your feet are landing on the ground and you're feeling earth and you're feeling gravity and you're like in this human body, and then you go on to have these other experiences. But I think that's just it. Like, it's wild how we're sold on these ideas, like that we need to chase happiness, for example, rather than being like, I mean, I had my fourth son died as a baby, and when I was 33, and about 6 months after that, I like came out of that experience to an extent. And I remember going for a walk one night and like looking up at the night sky and just being like, okay, I'm back. Like I hadn't really wanted to be here. Like I'd spent about 6 months and I have 3 older sons, beautiful children, like a lot to live for. But I just was like, being human is like too painful. Could you just like make this end? Was basically most of my conversations with God. Like, I don't want to be here. And in that moment, I was like, I'm recommitting. Like, I want to be here. I want to be a student of life. Like, sign me up. I want to experience it all. And I had no idea, speaking of prayer and setting into motion things, I had no idea the extent of that moment of being like sign me up. I just want to experience everything we can as humans. Like, it was a very interesting moment, but it felt like a renewed connection or commitment to what it is to be human, you know, and to really like feel deeply blessed even in these experiences that are really challenging, you know.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, falling in love with being human. You know, we are kind of cultivated to chase happiness and to do all of these like the mysteries of being a human have been tried to strip away from us. You know, they tried stripping away like everything that is mystical about human and being here on earth. Like, I mean, if you stop and you think about it, you're like, what in the hell is this place? Like, we're on this strange planet. Like, we don't need a Dr. Seuss book. Just like, look at the trees. It's like, what the hell is a tree? You know, look at fish in the ocean. Look at these animals that we keep as pets or don't keep as pets. And look at bugs. This place is strange than fiction, but we've kind of grown up in it, and then society normalizes, and then it takes away all of the mysteries and mystical aspects to being human. And it's like, wait a minute, like, no, I'm the lights have been on since I was a kid. Like, we're going through this journey. There's something deeper than me. I feel it. I know it, you know, but everything is telling me that this is all like I'm supposed to go and get up and work in a factory and work for 8 hours a day, come home, have a few beers, cook dinner, watch TV, and do it all again. Like, normal? That's normal. Like, there's nothing normal about this place, you know? So falling in love with like the process of being a human again, and like, you know, just going outside and laying on your back and looking at the sky as an adult. Like, kids do that. I used to do that as a kid anyway. Like, just look up at the clouds and be like, wow, look at these things. They're crazy. Well, at a certain point, we kind of stop doing those, and we get involved with our lives. But being able, like, I do that now. Like, I'll go and I'll sit outside and I'll just look up. You know, I do it at nighttime quite often, and it's just like, wow, just being able to reconnect with the mysteries of this place, and understanding that there's so much more to everything going on than just getting caught up into the hustle and bustle of the regular, quote unquote, normal life. You know, like, this place is bizarre and life is bizarre, and you know, I am grateful that I get to experience it, all of it, every bit of it, the downs and the ups and the downs, you know. So yeah.
I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I would happily keep going for a period of time. And I have to hop into a client call in about 15 minutes. So I would love to wrap it up. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we go on this one? This has been super fun. I had no intention of it going this long. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I can chat forever. No, I really appreciate you having me on and having this conversation. I had a lot of fun too. I really don't have anything else to add, but I am very grateful that we've connected and that we've crossed paths, and over, you know, I'm sure it was probably the legacy group with Jesse Elder.
I think so.
And it's led us here to this point to have this conversation. It was a lot of fun. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
Cool.